Well, shalom, shalom at this midweek service, Torah service. And we are studying this year in the Torah. And we started at Bereshit, Genesis 1:1. And right now we are at Genesis 37:1. Man, to 40:23. Doesn't it go so fast? And we're going to be discussing Vayeshev. Vayeshev, he continued living. And it's about Jacob, but it's more than about Jacob. It's interesting how when we get to chapter 40, the Bible talks about it this way. So we're going to go ahead and have the blowing of the shofar. And I'll just let our shofar Baal Tekiah. Okay. So let's go ahead and stand up for the blowing of the shofar.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech ha'olam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu l'shmol kol shofar. Blessed are you, O Lord our God, King of the universe, who has sanctified us with your commandments and instructed us to hear the voice of the shofar.
Amen, amen. Thank you, Lord. Thank you for the voice of the shofar. Thank you for the spirit of knowledge and wisdom. You said, our Messiah Yeshua, that he will come and he will teach us. May that be tonight. We ask that your spirit would teach us all about you, our Messiah Yeshua. Amen. Amen. Turn to somebody and say, shalom, shalom. Those are righteous words. Shalom, shalom. All right. Now this, for the rest of the year, will be our last Torah study. We'll take off in January. I think it'd be about the 8th and stuff, and right in that area, with Vayeshev. Okay? Vayeshev, I should have said Vayeshev. He lived. And it'll talk about Jacob's death, but it says he lived to be 147 years old. Not bad, seeing he was a shepherd. It was cold at night, and he let us know. Not bad that he had to live in a foreign country. Not bad all the things that happened in his life. His brother was going to kill him. And, you think you've had quite a life. He had quite a life. I'll tell you what. In fact, when he was introduced to Pharaoh, that's later on, but I just want to say, now don't tell him you're a shepherd. Joseph said that. Don't tell him you're a shepherd. And so he greets him, the Pharaoh greets Jacob and says, well, how's life, Oh, it's been very bad. I'm a shepherd, And Joseph's going, Dad, to the Pharaoh, because they didn't like shepherds. And so he said everything that was true. And I can see Pharaoh going, you came from him? So that's the way the Bible is. So we're going to take a look at it tonight. Back up the Vayeshev. He continued living. I wanted to put this part in. It's not really part of Vayeshev, but to the beginning of it. We're going to talk around 40 about Joseph. And so let's take a look at it. Yaakov, Jacob, continued living in the land where his father had lived as a foreigner. Isn't that interesting? They lived as foreigners in the land. Are we not all foreigners to this land? All lands. Earth is temporary. Heaven is forever, okay? Where we're going. But he didn't say, and I want to repeat this, and to you, thank you for joining us for this midweek service. And the Yeshua is Hebrew for Jesus. He did not say in the book of John, he did not say, I'm taking you to heaven. He says, I'm taking you to the Father, who happened to have created heaven so we can relate to him and have a place to go to. All right? But he says, I'm taking you to the Father. And that's what we have to understand. And I've told many times, I've said this, what's the good of going to a place if someone's not there? If I come to your house and I look at the outside of your house and I knock on the door and no one answers, I just went to a house. I didn't come to you. All right. So the land of Canaanites, I've seen the walls they built. I'll tell you, the Canaanites, they built walls. I was in one of the cities, Shiloh in Hebrew, and that's where Joshua said, God told Joshua, let's go get them. They have 5 tiers of walls that go back. How are you going to get up there? I mean, when he told them, I looked at those walls taller than a 12-foot ceiling. And they're made to where you could pour oil down, pour all sorts of shoot down. You're looking down. They said, go get them. You got to realize when God says for you to do something, it's him that gives you the victory. And I just want you to know, they're still there to this day, Canaanite walls. And so as we take a look at this, the land of Canaan. Here is the history of Jacob when Joseph. It's going to talk about Joseph. Here's the history of Jacob. Now it's tied up in Joseph. Here's the history of David. It's tied up in my kids. Here's the history of Sarah. And it says this. Here's the history when Sarah died. And it starts talking about who came on the scene? Some lady named Rebecca. Here's the history. She lived to be 127. Didn't say she lived to be 127. Interesting. You know we're never told how old they are? A Gentile wife. Joseph's wife. Any of the Gentile wives were never, it's as if this Gentile bride, it's as if they just go away. I don't know if that could be symbolic of a rapture or whatever, but many of the Jewish ones, it mentions their age. And Sarah is one. So they continued living in the land where his father is a foreigner. Here's the history of Jacob. When Joseph was 17 years old, he used to pasture the flock. Now, 17 in Gematria is victory. But it's going to be interesting. Now, Jacob had already started this because when he's going to meet Esau, he took the concubine's children and who they are and put them first. Okay? He put Leah's children second. He put Rachel's children third. Okay? So that started, and Joseph was the last to have to go meet Esau. So the brothers, they're kind of, all right. They're knowing that Joseph was a favored child. So now we go here. He used to pasture the flock with his brothers, even though he was still a boy. 17? All right, 18. We could say it's a man. 17, you're still a boy. Okay. Once when he was with the sons of Bela and the sons of Zippah, those were the others, his father's wives, he brought back a bad report about them to their father. He was sent out, to give them food and things like that. Interesting. But he brings back this bad, he says, Dad, they're not taking care of the sheep. Okay. Have you ever had a sibling tell on you? All right. All right. Nothing's new. So they sold him, and I wanted to take up of that. But Adonai was with Joseph. Now, I want you to know Abraham was the father of Ishmael. Okay? So he was also the father of Isaac, who fathered Jacob. Okay? Who fathered Joseph. Okay? The Midianites were children of Abraham. So this whole story of Joseph is a family thing. The one set, I think it was Abraham's child, the Midianites. He was born of his second wife, Keturah. They bought him, and I think if I got the story right, they sold him to Ishmael, which was Abraham's son, the Ishmaelites. It's wild. So it's all about Joseph and a family thing. All of that was family. Sometimes families can be really rough on you. And I tell people when you have troubles, it's in the Bible. There's all sorts of problems in the Bible. But you learn how God works with people and how to work these things out. So let's go on. I'm thinking, man. So now, he was with Potiphar, and his wife accused him of coming after her. And of course he didn't. We know the story. But I have to think that Potiphar, he didn't believe it because he could have had him killed. He's a slave, He could have he put him in the king's prison. And I don't know about you, but prisons are not nice as they were back. They're not nice prisons back then. But there must have been a king's prison. And that's where he was put, which makes me think, you're a slave. You are accused by the warden's wife of trying to molest her. And you're put in the king's prison. Okay. That's something for you to consider. So, but Adonai, now he's in prison, was with Joseph, showing him grace. How can you be in a prison, all these things, and you have grace? You've been lied about. How many of you would say, God, what's in it? What is going on? We're going to take a look at that story, because who hasn't been, quote, falsely accused? All right. Showing him grace and giving him favor. Favor. I pray for people to have favor, like if you're looking for a job or whatever that is. Lord, that this is where it may not seem the best or whatever, but if you want them to have, let them have favor. Or her. Let her have favor in God's sight. Give him favor in the sight of the prison warden. The prison warden made Joseph supervisor of all the prisoners in the prison. Well, you got to go, all right? He didn't stop being Joseph, whose name, is favor to increase, Yosef, to increase. And he keeps increasing wherever he's at. The prison warden made Joseph supervisor of the prisoners in the prison, so that whatever they did there, he was in charge of it. That's got to be quite a thing. I don't know about you what Egyptian prisons were really like that time, but man, he was in charge of it. The prison warden paid no attention to anything Joseph did. Now, people, that's a government employee. Am I right? I mean, what you're going, man, why wouldn't he? He earned their trust. He had to work through all of this. In prison, they had his trust, a prisoner. Okay. So, because Adonai was with him, isn't that something on your bio, your biography? That he didn't pay attention to anything because he trusted him. By the way, Pharaoh, in the end, trusted him. He said, I want to go bury my father. He's second in command. He's going back home. He could have took him and started an uprising. He was in charge of the military. And Pharaoh says, okay, go do it. Really? You're letting your military go with a Hebrew who was a slave at one time, who wrongly was put in prison, and you're saying, okay, come back. Joseph went, came back. Man, that's trust. This man had trust. Because Adonai was with him, and whatever he did, Adonai prospered it. In the Psalms, it says, even while you sleep, I will prosper you. Even while you sleep. I think it's the 127th, is it? One of those Psalms right in there. It says, but the wicked, he says, they stay up, they get up early, and they stay up late. And you know what it says? And they're doing it for nothing. Wow. Not that we're not to work, Joel, but it's God that prospers us. Remember, Jacob had learned that. said, God, you blessed me. And that was last week. And God changed his name. Finally, you're now Israel. After he asked for God to bless him. Because Adonai was with him. How is it the Lord with you when everything seems to be going wrong? I mean, you guys haven't had where you've been separated from your father, lied about. Your dad thinks. But the word is kind of interesting. He didn't really believe him. Okay? Jacob. Okay? Yaakov. Didn't really believe him when the brothers said, see, it's all bloody and whatever, his cloth. Because later on, when they said he's alive, it's like, yeah, I always knew it. But he was distraught because he wasn't with his son. So here it is. How's the Lord with you? I'll ask you to consider this at this moment as you're watching this video, this live stream, I guess I should say, of this Torah study. How is it that God is with you when you're in a bad job? You have a bad manager or someone? How is it that God is with you? You think, man, can it get any worse? Then it gets worse. How do you feel at those times? Do you feel that God is with you? He didn't understand. Joseph understood. He had this dream. Even his own dad says, you're a dreamer. Well, thus he is. Even his own dad and the brothers, they got really mad because he said, this dream that the sheaves, they're bowing down to me and all of this. And it didn't go too good with the dad or the sons. So sometimes God puts you in places and you don't know what. I'll tell you what, can I say this? Before Joseph, who's now going to be the second in command of Egypt, the world's greatest nation at that time, he'll know what it's like to sentence someone to prison because he'll have that power. You're going to be in prison. He did it with his brother, Simon, because he figured out when Reuben said in Hebrew, I told you not to do this, Joseph knew it was Simon did it. And so he had him put in prison so he could feel it. But he took care of him. So I just want you to know that he's learning through all of this too. So the Lord is with you even when everything seems to be going wrong. And I want you to know, if you're in a hard spot right now, I'm just going to stop. It doesn't mean God's not with you. Understand. Okay? Lock it in. Whatever he did, Adonai prospered. What is possible meaning of that? I mean, it worked out? Whatever he did. He's in a prison. He's going to stay there for longer. We'll take a look at what it means of this. Because God has a purpose. By the way, I read today, because I like financial things, not because we have this big money and all this stuff or anything, but the Rial, R-I-A-L, Rial, it is Iranian money. It used to be, before 1979, about 3,000 rials to $1. But because of what they've done to Israel and all that, it is now, today, remember 3,000 during the Shah, 79, now it's 777,000 reals to the dollar. They spent so much money wanting to kill people that they have to turn off their street lights now because they didn't build up their infrastructure to even give their people electricity. Why? Hatred. Let me add something to that. Saul hated David for no reason. Saul the king. So he's chasing after him. His people don't like it. They started like, why are you chasing David? He killed all these people for us. Saul killed his thousands, but David his 10,000s. And so his armies, people don't realize, he's not taking care of his army. He's got this hatred. When people have this hatred, even in politics, they forget about the district that they're in. All they want is to get that man. They just want to get that person. And they forget about everything else. And all of a sudden, they're getting weaker and weaker and weaker, and they don't realize it. It's draining their finances, their time, their emotions, because they're going to get this person. And all of a sudden, the Philistines come, and his army is too weak. And they kill him. I just want you to know, be careful if you have a vendetta against somebody that you can't let it go, because it will make you weaker and weaker. Okay. So here it is. The guard changed to be with them, and because they're attendant while they remained in prison. So it was later, I should read the whole thing, the Egyptian king's cupbearer and baker, you know the story, gave offense to the Lord, the king of Egypt. Pharaoh became angry with his two officers, the chief cupbearer. You know what they were. They always had to smile. Remember Daniel? He wasn't smiling one day, and the king said, "What's wrong, Daniel?" Because he's another one of those that did everything right and stood before the king. He says, "You got a problem?" He says, "It's Jerusalem." And he had won the king's favor. What about Jerusalem? So those are important positions. And the bakers. So he put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard, in the prison, in the same place where Joseph was kept. So even though he's in prison and stuff, it's like God setting him up. The captain of the guard charged Joseph to be with them, and he became their attendant while they remained in prison. Why would prisoners need an attendant? Wouldn't that be nuts? Well, I don't want to try it out. I don't want to be in I don't want to be in prison and go, can I be your attendant? You know what I mean? Okay, because it's royal. It's the king's prison. All right. One night, the two of them, the king of Egypt's cupbearer and baker, they're in prison. By the way, the prison, it uses the word house. Was it in the same house? I don't know. Both had dreams, each dream with its own meaning. Prison, meaning a house. Isn't that something? I don't know if I want to make that my home, but So God's taking care of Joseph too. Joseph came in to them in the morning, saw they looked sad. He asked Pharaoh's officers there with him in the prison of his master's house, "Why are you looking so sad?" Just like Daniel happened today. Does this show us anything about Joseph's character? Yeah, he cares about other people, regardless of his circumstances. They said to him, "Reach out a dream, and there's no one around who can interpret it." Joseph said to them, "Don't interpretations belong to God? Tell it to me, please." Now, this is Egypt. They had more gods, I think, than you can believe. They had gods and gods. But do you think that the two officials knew that Joseph was talking about the God of Israel? I don't know. Isn't that interesting? Joseph, he says interpretations come about the God from God. Tell it to me, please. By the way, back then, and that people had city-state gods. Like, wow, we defeated you. Our city-state God's better than your God. It had to do with a smaller area, not like the God of the whole universe. All right. The Egyptians shared a belief widespread in antiquity. Sleep puts us in real and direct contact with the other world, where not only the dead, but also the gods dwell. Dreams, therefore, are a gift from the gods. That was their thought process back then. All right? Don't interpretations belong to God? In John 12, "For I, Yeshua, have not spoken of my own initiative, but the Father who sent me has given me a command, namely, what to say and how to say it." So you have to remember, sleeping was almost equivalent to death because you have no control. Dreams come, all sorts of things. But it says when the dead know nothing, it means you can't do anything while you're asleep or when you're dead. That's what it means by they know nothing. It doesn't mean you go to sleep and wake up at a later date. I know how certain groups feel that way, but they don't know what the word know means. The dead know. In other words, they're not communicating with the world as such. They have no effect on the world. Then the chief cupbearer told Joseph his dream. Now, listen to this. This is very important of this whole story. It's very descriptive. Okay? In my dream, there was in front of me a vine, and the vine had 3 branches. The branches budded. Look at how descriptive he's showing this. Then it suddenly began to blossom, and finally clusters of ripe grapes appeared. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand. So I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup and gave the cup to Pharaoh. So before we start this right here, David was being pursued by Absalom. He left the city. People say, well, he got scared of his son who was going to kill him. No, David had compassion. A lot of people in Jerusalem would be massacred because it was warfare. His son was coming to get him and kill a lot of people. David was sparing the people. David was a mighty warrior. He would never flee. But he did in this case. All right. And then 2 prophets, I forget their names, but one, they say, and I think so, it was Uriah's wife, okay, her uncle, who he had an affair with. All right. So, Beersheba. All right, if you look at the lineage and stuff, you can see that. And he wanted David. So he goes to the King David, and he says, you got to kill this man quick. He's a fighter. Just go get him. Just like that. Why am I telling this story? Because you're going to see. But the one that was King David's trusted advisor, David said, you go back and talk to him. So he's told Absalom, you're the greatest. You're the most wonderful. And he goes on and on about how wonderful you are. You don't need to pursue them. The people are with you. Look at you. It's like they're the grains of sand. And so Absalom took all that in. And the other one, I'm sure, was Beersheba. He went and hung himself because he knew that he wouldn't listen to him, and he's going to end up getting voted out of office. All right? He would be killed. So Absalom, prideful, listened to the one that told him all how good he is. So in this story, you have this guy telling all the definite and stuff. And like, this is for real. So the 3 branches are 3 days. Interesting how many times 3 is mentioned. Notice that the progression of the dream, Pharaoh will lift up your head in this. So here's interpretations, and restore you to your office. So the guy's going, whoa, all right. And here's another area in 2 Kings 25 where it talked about having his head, okay? Taking off your head's quite a thing. But remember me when it goes well with you. Joseph is now starting to wonder, is God with him? You remember me? I mean, it wears on all of us. Lord, or you tell somebody else, remember me. I'm in this prison. And we're all humans. Remember me. And show me kindness, please. And mention me to Pharaoh. You stand in front of him. I've showed you this kindness, and it's a good, okay? It's a good prophecy, so he'll release me from this prison. Now, it's a different term, dungeon. Could Joseph be showing signs of discouragement because of all his ordeals? Dungeon. Look, this was a rabbi. Why would Joseph call the house a dungeon? Could this be prophetic statement of the nation of Israel? We don't know. But there's 100, one person said, I haven't seen them all, there's 100 pictures of the Messiah in the story of Joseph. Case in point, you may not think about it. They were coming to a brother later on in the story who they thought was dead, but is in control of everything. They were speaking, quote, to what they thought was a dead brother. And he's alive. Is that a beautiful picture of Yeshua? That our people were the last people to come to Joseph to get food? He revealed himself. All right. So they feel somewhat that one of those pictures, that's rabbinical Judaism. For the truth is that I was kidnapped from the land of the Hebrews. He's talking to him now. Well, wait a minute. And here too I have done nothing wrong that would justify putting me in this dungeon. Why didn't Joseph talk about his brothers who sold him into slavery? Would he you? Well, my neighbor did this to me. My brother did this to me. You understand? Isn't that unusual that you've been sold into slavery? You've been placed in and then accused of something you didn't do with the warden's wife or the person's wife. You didn't do it. And now you're in prison. And it must be for a while. And he said, I was kidnapped in the land of the Hebrews. He doesn't mention his brothers. Wow. Okay. And here too, I've done nothing wrong to justify. Whoever kidnaps someone must be put to death. It's in the Torah. So why did Joseph show mercy? Does that mean all the people that brought over slaves? Who kidnapped them? I can't send the Torah. You can try to sidestep whatever. Interesting. Regardless of whether he has already sold him or the person is found still in his possession. Kidnapping. We're not saying buy and sell, that sort of thing. Kidnapping. All right. That must mean huge to the Lord. But this is pre-Torah portion here. When the chief baker saw that the interpretation was favorable, he said to Joseph, now look at the difference in what one guy said and the other guy, how he described it. That's why I told you that story about David's counselors. When the chief baker saw that it was favorable, he said to Joseph, I too saw in my dream there was 3 baskets of white bread on my head. In the upmost basket, there were all kinds of baked goods from Pharaoh. It didn't tell you how it got made or anything, but the birds ate them and the basket on my head. Boom, that was it. It was kind of a simple one. So Joseph answered, here is the interpretation. The 3 baskets are 3 days. There we go again. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head from off of you. He'll hang you on a tree, and the birds will eat your flesh off you. Thank you. I mean, you're in a prison. One guy gets a good one, and the other person, he says, the birds are going to pick your flesh. What was that guy? His movie, The Birds? Alfred Hitchcock, The Birds. And I'm thinking, some of you are too young to even know what that was about, but it was kind of a sci-fi type thing. Notice how much less detail was in the chief baker's dream, and there was no progression of events that would lead to the restoration. There was no restoration in this. There was no progression of events saying, okay, I did this, then I stood in front of Pharaoh, then I did this. It was just boom. This was Joseph's first interpretation of dreams for others. Now, he had dreams, but he didn't interpret them. Interesting. So here it is, his first, so why couldn't he interpret his own dreams? All of a sudden, he's this dreamer, and he interpreted, but his own dreams he couldn't interpret. Isn't that interesting? But he did at the very end of the story. He said, now I know. God sent me ahead of you to preserve your life. Just like Yeshua. God sent him ahead of us to preserve our life. Wow. Sensitive story to me. All right. So it was in there. We're going to go on. On the third day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, he gave a party for all his officials, and he lifted up the head of the chief cupbearer and the head of the chief baker among his officials on his birthday. All right? Interesting, only Pharaoh and Herod's birthdays are recorded in the Bible. We had some people, some of them came here. They started teaching our children you can't have birthdays because the only 2 birthdays were all a bad scene. All right? Only 2 birthdays, but we knew Moses was 120. They don't understand what it is. That's where people get this stuff. The Bible's trying to show you they used their power and their celebration to kill. It was John the Baptist's head, Herod. It was one of the baker. It wasn't that you can't have birthdays. It's to show you they use their power, ungodly men, to celebrate the power they've got to kill. All right? I just want you to know that. That's my interpretation. Okay. How would we know that, what was it, Jacob lived to be 147 years old? How would we know any of this? Why would it say, and Sarah lived 120 and 7? You know, people make anything out of anything. All right, there's some groups that's the way it is. Herod and Pharaoh, there's only 2 birthdays mentioned. But I think you're drawing the wrong conclusion out of this. The conclusion is, don't use your power to kill upon someone or for wicked stuff. All right. Well, Joseph's next interpretation of a dream would be Pharaoh's dream. Well, it starts out with these prisoners that were part of Pharaoh's court. Did the correct interpretation of the official's dreams give Joseph more confidence when facing the Pharaoh? I would like to say that what we go through gives us more confidence in trusting God. Abraham, his wife, when they left, they rehearsed in where they had lived in Chaldees. They had rehearsed because she must have been some quite 90-year-old looking lady in that, you know. I mean, well, she was in her 80s earlier. But he thought they would kill him and take Sarah. So she's my sister, which was kind of correct, but not correct. Partial. All right? Well, he had to learn that God will take care of him. Famine comes, you're doing God's will, all of a sudden something's gone wrong, and you're going, oh man, everything. So he goes down to Egypt, tells Pharaoh. He said, Pharaoh at that time, he said, she's my sister. Then you wouldn't be treating your sister that way if she's your sister. He looked out and saw what was going on. But God kept his promise. He says, I'll make you rich. Okay? He said, don't lie to me anymore. Okay? So they go back. He sends them off. That's probably where he got Hagar from, the Egyptian, Ishmael. Okay? So now God kept his part because he did leave. He wasn't told to leave with Lot. Sometimes we take things with us that, all right. But anyway, so he goes back and he tells Avimelech, and this is one of my most favorite parts I like to act out, so I will. And so Avimelech has a nightmare. Says, you touch that woman, you're dead. Okay? Even people that aren't, quote, serving God can have a dream. Because he was told at first it didn't succeed, let's try it again. And that's where we learned that they had rehearsed it. So Abimelech, he gets up and he said, Abraham, you're a prince. I mean, wow, don't, tell me the truth. And so then he goes to Sarah, princess, He says, this is for you. Then he goes like this, and for your brother. Oh, you see what he did? He put him, sometimes we get with the world, we're corrected. Okay? Not that they're doing godly things. It's just that the world corrects us. All right? I've been corrected by the world before when someone was saying, Jesus Christ. And I didn't correct the person in our office. And a lady who, in the Dalles area, they opened up a nudist club, who was a little interesting kind of a person. How do I know? Because she told the people in the office. That was her dream. She stood up, and I should have done this, to this guy cursing and saying Jesus Christ and all this stuff, and said, this is what she said, tall, skinny lady. And I remember it. He says, why do you keep saying Jesus? Have you ever thought maybe this man loves you? And I just went, I should have said that. He knows how to bring out of you and correct you to not be ashamed to stick up for the name. So I'm telling on myself, okay, did I do anything wrong? Maybe not. I mean, if people would look at it, that I didn't say nothing. But why didn't I stick up for his name? Okay, there's a right time to do things, right place. All right. So he restored them back to his position so that, again, Pharaoh gave his cup, but he hanged the chief baker as Joseph had done it. So here's this. Interpretation, even giving more confidence. I'm going to say yes. The reason I told you the story of Abraham, he kept having to get more confidence. He intervened for Lot, went all the way up north, up by Syria, brought down the kings that got captured. So, and Lot goes back to Sodom and Gomorrah. Now God's going to Abraham's God's friend. So when he's your friend, he shares things with you. And so he said, I'm going to destroy Sodom, Gomorrah. Well, will you kill someone if there's 50 righteous? You see that? He's learning God doesn't do things, plays with righteous people. Got him to 10, okay. And God kept his promise. But now Abraham's learning. God keeps his promise. He's learning all these things through all of this. And so when it's time to give his son, take your son, your only son. Oh, what about Ishmael? Okay? That was his first son. He said, take your only son, whom you love. And so Abraham takes him. It's called the binding of Isaac. Okay, and he says, and when we return, he told his servants, and when we return. He's learned to trust God. But it was a process. Joseph is learning to trust God, though he's feeling a little bad. Okay, we're going to get through this, so I'm going to go on. Nevertheless, the chief cupbearer didn't remember Joseph, but forgot him. You ever had someone said, I'll do something for you, then they forget about you? Because he's busy taking care of the Pharaoh's cup. But he forgot about him. But God didn't. Don't put your trust in princes or mortals who cannot help. It was a situation. Have you helped others and they forgot that you helped? How did you feel? Yeah, I guess you learned through it. I think we've all done that. We were hoping someone would remember, Messianic Jews, chapter 6. For God is not so fair as to forget your work and the love you showed for him in your past servants to his people and in your present service too. God's not a man, and he doesn't forget. And I think that's the end of this one. And I just wanted you to know God's not so unfair to forget your service. He remembers. And at the right time, in Revelation 22, it says, I am coming again, Yeshua, and my rewards are with me to what you have done. He's forgiven you for your past. But if you think what you do doesn't matter to God, then it says his rewards are with him. It's nice to have those rewards. I have my idea what they are, that it's a greater knowledge of God. But it's interesting that something comes up in the next Torah portion, and it'll be about Pharaoh has a dream. And it's about the skinny cows and the fat cows. And the fat cows get eaten up by the skinny cow. You know the story. And I thought, now that's an interesting dream. Okay? And then as we go through, and we're going to be coming back at the beginning of next year, but as we go through that whole story, you're going to find out that he took his signet ring. Didn't Haman get the signet ring to show his power, that he could do whatever he wanted? Doesn't Yeshua have the authority of the Lord? All right, in his power. All these things are important because God was making him the second in all of Egypt. But he looked like an Egyptian. Isn't that interesting? Our people think that Yeshua looks like a European. Isn't that interesting? And yet he's their brother. I just thought that those are interesting things about how these stories are. But I want you to know, he hung in there. He didn't lose who he was. No matter what it was, he didn't understand, but he didn't lose. And when and now I'm going to close with this, when you're going through difficulties and things that are unfavorable, and I'll call them that, don't lose who you are. You're a child of God. Keep who it is. You care about other people. You're not out there to punish everybody and I'm going to get you type stuff. But we're there to serve God. And we're there, and I don't know why. I'm not saying I enjoyed working for bosses who I thought they should have been fired a long time ago, which later on, after they weren't my boss, did get fired. I looked for job opportunities in which I thought I had the inroad, I had everything good, and they picked somebody else, which later on, the job dried up, and they let them go. And I was feeling, how can they overlook me? I mean, there's a lot of these things, and that's what these stories are about, to let us know we keep being who we are. Joseph kept being Joseph, and he brought great wealth to all. He bought the world, basically, except for the priestly parts. So just keep being who you are the rest of this year, no matter what happens in it. And that's a hard one to say, but be who you are. And I'll finish with this story. Out in the parking lot, there was before we had a fence around our parking lot, there was a group of kids, 4 of them. A couple gals and a couple guys showing off to the gals. Okay? They were sitting down and smoking, and I don't know what kind of smoke it was. And I went out there, and I've learned before not to say, hey, you knock it off. They just, get that. I said, young people, let me talk to you. I said, what you're doing is not hurt. It's not helping your body. It's really hurting it. I said, you're our future. And when I say that, they always look. One of the gals started getting tears in their eyes, and they got up. But one boy, and I don't know if it was because the gal's there, he started giving me faces like this. And I said, young man, I'm going to tell you something this. Even though you're disrespecting me, and I talk to you in a nice way, I'm not going to disrespect you because that's who I am. I show people respect. He looked at me, quit giving faces, got up and walked away. And I told him about Yeshua, Jesus, I would say, because I don't have time, now we call him Yeshua. But I just want you to know that was my part, and I have to learn these things, to be as God wants me to be, to respect people, not what they do so much, but to respect them. And I'm not going to become like them. In this world, we're in it, but we're not of it. We don't take on their roles. If we're a person that's honest, then we're honest. If they're dishonest, that's on them. We're honest people. So there you go. I just wanted you to know with that story right out here in this parking lot that let them know. I've had some people tell me they open up. Because young people, you are our future. And we want to make sure we help you along in this life. And it's all about Yeshua, Jesus the Messiah. And we're going to keep being who we are until his return or he takes us to be with him. Shalom. Lehiturot. God's peace until we meet again on Wednesdays. It'll be next year. Amen. I am done, and it's barely after 8 o'clock, which means